The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining this Test Studio webinar presented by Progress. Let's give it 1 minute or so more so that all the registered attendees can join, and then we can start. Thank you. All right, thanks for your patience. One more time, I see that most of the people are already here, so we can roll with today's webinar about Test Studio and how to prevent critical bugs from slipping into production. With that too, my name is Peter. I'm a sales engineer at Progress. With most of you, we already met at the Eurostar conference. Today, presenting with me and the actual demo will be carried out by Andy Wieland, who is the manager of sales engineering in Progress. And with us is also Ilian, the product manager for the Test Studio product, which you also met on the Eurostar conference. Before we start with the agenda, which you can see on your screens, just a little bit about the logistics of the webinar. You're all muted, so you can be loud as much as you wish. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, please use the questions panel in your GoToMeeting application, and we, especially Ilian, will answer them on the spot. Also, this session is recorded, and the recording version will be sent to anyone right after it finishes. And with that said, let's go through the agenda of the webinar. It is split into two main parts. Some slides from PowerPoint, in which we're going to talk about the 5 failures that you can't afford, holes testing, how to choose a solution, who are the personas that use Telerik's Test Studio, what makes it so reliable, of course. And we're going to allocate a few minutes to show you one of the latest features that we have. And as soon as this finishes, we're going to switch to the actual presentation, actual live demo of the tool, which is going to be carried by Andy. All right, let's start with the agenda first. What are the 5 failures that you can't afford? We already discussed this with some of you during the conference, and we managed to pinpoint that embarrassment is really very important. I mean, especially when you have a bug that somehow slipped into production, which was missed by the corresponding team. It really creates a lot of embarrassment throughout your organization. FOMO, the fear of missing out, it gives you that nasty feeling that you can't utilize your team to its fullest capacity. Right, you still can't get the best out of it. When you feel cheated, especially when you fail to build maintainable tests, we all know what happens during regression, or we all know when a new functionality is introduced, whether by the toolset or the developers. You might feel exhausted if you're already invested into a concrete toolset, which, however, due to different reasons, is failing to bring you the necessary results. that you have expected to. And last but not least, the feeling of being broken when you fail to be that agile, whether you're trying to do Scrum or DevOps or whatever. I think that most of you will recognize either one or more, why not all 5 of them, of those failures which unfortunately we encounter in our work. We also wanted to talk about who owns testing within your organization. We have some interactive slides here with the pins that you can see on your screen. First of all, a lot of companies still practice manual testing. It doesn't require that much of a technical skill set necessary to start doing it. It's really easy to start doing manual testing, but the thing is that it's very difficult to scale. If you really want to go faster, if you want to decrease your time to market, you need to hire more manual QAs, which needs to perform one and the same tasks from 1 to indefinite number of times a day. I remember my times when I started my career as a manual QA, and we had this simple login form that we needed to test throughout multiple websites. Believe me, it was a hell trying to log in multiple times to get at least the basic scenarios in order to go through. In many organizations that we talk to, by the way, it's the development or the developers who own testing. While they're much more technical than the manual QAs, on one hand, on the other, it really within your organization's technical debt, which these developers need to maintain, right? And again, we have the same issue here. It's really difficult to scale because if you want to go faster and decrease the time to market, you need again to hire more. Most of their time is spent on this rather than working on the actual new features that you need to introduce within your applications. And of course, we have a third scenarios based on the companies we work with. They have both less technical and more technical departments, which are involved and kind of split the ownership of testing. The problem here is that most often they use separate tools. Sometimes they really duplicate the effort without knowing what the other is doing, which means that there is hardly or none collaboration between them. And remember, from what we discussed, we're positioning Test Studio not only as a UI automation testing tool, but also as a collaboration tool, and you understand why throughout this presentation and demonstration. Who are the Test Studio customers? I think this is going to be very useful for you. As I mentioned, most of them involve both technical and non-technical testers and or developers who are practicing an agile approach. I like to say agile approach, depending on the methodology or technology that they would like to use, Scrum or Kanban or DevOps, whatever. And they come to us also because of the collaboration. Remember, we need to make sure that everybody on the table talks to each other. And this could happen with the help of Test Studio. It means that your QAs can be concentrating on bringing quality to your product and making sure it falls within the requirements, while your developers, they can help your testers on one hand whether it's going to be thanks to a helper class or some more technical coded scenario that needs to be implemented into the testing solution, or doing the actual job of focusing and building and maintaining the actual features of the application. And all of this should happen without damaging the real speed of development and QA. As you can see here, it doesn't matter where you move the pin, to the left or to the right. Everybody has seat on the table. This is something that you're going to hear and see very often from us and whenever Test Studio is involved. Because at the end, what actually matters is that you have the right testing strategy, which allows you to collaborate, as we like to say. Why everybody has a seat on the table and what the table is actually. Here's our interactive table. This is your entire department. This is your entire team. Anyone who is involved within the development and the release and the testing of your application. First, we start with the developers on the left. Just a little note here, Test Studio, apart from being a standalone application, it also exists as a Visual Studio plugin, which targets mainly the developers. We all know that no developer would like to switch context from their favorite IDE, like with the example of Visual Studio. They want to be able to work and stay within their favorite IDE. That's why we have this plugin. It has most of the functionalities that the standalone product of Test Studio has, but it allows the developers to actively contribute and collaborate with the rest of the departments. Whether it's going to be, for example, creating a helper class, which later can be, this is one of the basic scenarios that I can think of at the moment, which you can later on reuse within your tests, let's say. The QA tester, the other important persona, depending on the skill sets and the needs of your QA department. We have the Test Studio standalone application, which resides within 2 tiers, the so-called Test Studio Web and Desktop, which gives you all the necessary features needed to do automation UI testing. And if you want to go one step further and doing some vault or performance or API tests, you can leverage the Test Studio Ultimate tier. We also added the managers here, as you can see, thanks to our executive results dashboard. This is one of the latest features that we introduced with our October release of Test Studio. The executive dashboard resides separately from Test Studio Ultimate or Web and Desktop Edition or the Visual Studio plugin. It can be, once it's set up as a little web app, it can be accessed by everybody throughout your organization without the necessity of them having a separate license of it, right? And with this executive dashboard, a quick demo of which I'm going to show you shortly after, your management can be instantly aware of the health and overall status of your project based on the execution of the test lists. All right, all of these guys, everybody who has a seat on the table, they talk to each other and collaborate first thanks to Test Studio and based, of course, of the shared source control, bug tracking whenever a test fails, you can manually or automatically submit a bug from Test Studio to your favorite bug tracking system, and of course on the built integrations and the CI and CD that you might have. Right. With that said, let's move further throughout the presentation and talk a little bit about what makes Test Studio tests so bulletproof. And I'm going to outline some of the major features and benefits that Test Studio provides. First and foremost, you can use our point-and-click recorder, which allows you to codelessly record your tests. Remember, when we were looking at those interactive pins, you might choose the less technical approach, or you want to choose if you want to choose the high technical approach, you can scratch all of this and you can code with C# or VB.NET all of your tests if you want. Right, but if you want to go with the codeless approach, you really don't have to write a single line, an element, a block of code. If you want to do, for example, some conditional logic or if else or while loop, if you want to invoke some JavaScript commands, handle login dialogues or some word dialogues, if you want to extract values into variables, perform different types of verification. All of this can happen with our context menus, which you can see on your screen, with the codeless approach of Test Studio point-and-click recorder. Another cool feature, we say that we support the full cross-browser set, which is available on the market at the moment, including the beta version of Chromium browser, which you see on your screens. This is something that we released, which was part of our October release first. You can correspondingly record and run the same tests without doing any modification to all of the contemporary modern web browsers, which you can see on this slide. And with the help of the Test Studio runtime, by the way, this is another tier that we offer. Think of it as an executing agent, which you can distribute throughout your physical or virtual machines, and with which you can only execute tests. But if you spread them throughout your different machine, you can create that kind of a test matrix to make sure that your application can run on a clean box set up with Chrome browser, or another box which is set up with Firefox browser, etc., etc., etc. And of course, Test Studio offers a very rich and extensible model to automatically build find expressions. This is something that you also hear very often from us, especially the ones who have already had a personal demonstration of our tool. I always want to underline that before you start your project, before you record your first test with Test Studio, you need to go through the settings and play a little bit with them so that they match your specific case, your specific scenario. And what you can see above is our find logic. At the moment, by default, the first element is ID, attribute is ID, sorry, but you can modify this, give priority of Test Studio to search by, let's say, source or href or whatever first. Right, and this is something that you can configure in your project. Continuing with the features and what makes Test Studio tests so bulletproof, we have the built-in translators. First, Test Studio ships with the standard translators for web and desktop. applications, and by desktop I mean WPF ones. What are translators? Apologies about that. These are extensions that open up a specific element to work with Test Studio. So you go one step further with the capabilities that you have. And for the ones that are familiar with the Progress suite of controls, logically, Test Studio ships with translators, which are built specifically for the Telerik UI for Blazor, one of the latest additions in our portfolio, for the Telerik UI for ASP.NET Ajax, and Silverlight controls. Telerik's can do UI for jQuery, and Telerik's can do UI for Angular. So all of those translators are available out of the box for you in Test Studio. We're proud to say that we have the industry's first element and image-based find logic, which is think of it as a combination between attribute-based and image-based element identifications, and you can choose either one of them to be your primary, or you can choose both of them. During the demo, Andy will show you, but in order to quickly explain what we mean by that, I'm going to give you my favorite example. Think of Yahoo Mail. For the ones of you who are still using Yahoo, like me, for example, every time you're trying to access your email in yahoo.com, you need to click on the little envelope icon. And good luck trying to automate this, because the ID of this little icon changes anytime the site loads. So anytime you click it, and every time you execute the test, its ID, being dynamic, will change. And believe me, it's a huge pain trying to automate such a simple test. But this is not the case when you have the image-based element identification, what the Studio provides. All of this, of course, allows you to create and reduce the maintenance time needed for the creation and execution of your tests, which logically reduces the time to market. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about our support. We do have 97, or actually more, if I'm not mistaken, percentage of satisfaction rate by our support team. They're always there to guide you step by step for your inquiries, questions, or concerns. You have constant access to them, no matter if you have a trial of Test Studio or the actual licensed purchased product. And the beautiful part of this is that the actual guys that support Test Studio are the people who actually build it. So you get your questions answered directly by the engineers who have created our product. Let's move further now within the presentation and see what's next before we start the demo. We have our 30-second speech here, what Test Studio is about, the so-called ultimate test automation solution. So all the technologies that you can see on your screen are supported out of the box by Test Studio, meaning that you can automate your web or desktop applications, whether it's an HTML5 app, whether it's using React or Angular, the latest frameworks, or the previous ones built on jQuery, JavaScript. Blazor is available thanks to the translators we have with the latest release. As I mentioned, with Test Studio, you can also perform load tests, and you can automate your RESTful API. Test Studio integrates directly with source control. As we mentioned, we support Git and TFS, including Azure DevOps. By the way, within Azure DevOps, you can create a self-hosted agent which you can attach to your pipelines, and then whenever you have an automated build or you have a release build, you can trigger Test Studio test lists to automatically fire and perform the necessary checks, right? We have very extensive and thorough documentation on this integration. So whoever is interested into that can request a personal demo, or they can go over into our documentation and do it themselves. Talking about bug tracking, we directly integrate with Jira and again TFS or Azure DevOps, meaning that whenever your test execution fails, you can select to either manually or directly and automatically submit a bug which has all the information, the expected result, the screenshots, the state, the log, and it can go directly into Jira or TFS. In terms of CI or CD build servers, we talk and work directly with Jenkins. We have a plugin for it. We are Bamboo, TeamCity, and of course Azure DevOps. As I mentioned, we have documentation how to set up for each one of these options. A few words about feedware. It's very popular within our community, and I'm pretty sure most of you have heard or used it. For the past several years, feedware actually has been a part of Progress family of products. Test Studio uses feedware. Test Studio actually is built on top of some parts of feedware core, which allows you to easily capture traffic, whether it's going to be for your load tests or for your REST or web API tests. And of course, it allows you to examine this traffic based on a performance test that you can create. In Test Studio, I know most of you want and to switch directly to the actual demo now and see what Test Studio can do. But just before that, it's a very useful and very nice statistic. For the past 6 months, we've been collecting some information from our existing customers who use Test Studio, and from what you can see on your screens, most of the guys are still in the process of doing full automation. It means that their application, their product is automated from 30 to 50%. So let's say that half of the application is automated successfully on average, of course. But thanks to that, these customers have achieved up to 45% decrease in their testing cycle times. And you can do the math if you scale this one and automate your application to the fullest. Right. It's demo time, finally. Before I switch to my colleague Andy, I want to show you Test Studio's interactive executive dashboard, which you can see on your screens. Again, it was part of our latest October release. Quickly, it can be accessed throughout your organization without the necessity of having a license. You can distribute it to your TVs or your large screens so that everybody can see what's happening with your project. What this interactive dashboard show you quickly? First, Here you can select a bunch of projects which are available within Test Studio. You can select how quickly the dashboard refreshes automatically, of course. Just a quick note, you can directly feed information from Test Studio, or you can manually input results within the dashboard based on a project. What you see below is the panel with all of your current test lists, the status of the last run of the test list, the date and time of the last run of the list, the status of the last 10 runs. As you can see here, this failing test list has run 2 times unsuccessfully, unfortunately, and the success rate is only 0%. Here is something that we have more information on, and of course you can add it to your favorites. Whenever you click on such a test list, you can see all the test runs here with their start and end times, whether they were rerun, yes or no, and the machine they were executed on with the corresponding status of the run. It's a simple table which you can use all the sorting and filtering capabilities. Whenever you click on details on a run, you can drill down the information, the browser it was run on, the status of the corresponding run, and of course the steps which were part of this run of this test list. And if you click here, we have the view log, which allows you to see all the data for the corresponding test list run. And this data can be copied to clipboard and moved further if you wish. Right. This is in brief our executive dashboard. Stay tuned for the upcoming features for it, which we're going to release at the, starting from the beginning of next year. All right, so let's go back now to the actual demo time. I'm going to pass the show to my colleague Andy, who will do a demonstration. Just a second to switch controls, and Andy.
Great, thank you.
Now.
Thank you, Peter. All right, just get my screen shared out here. It should be showing up any moment now. All right, so I have the privilege of taking you through Test Studio and showing you some of the capabilities here today. First and foremost, what I have on screen is what we call sort of a master test. This example will really take you through a CRUD operation, giving you the ability to, first of all, modularize your test into small components that you might be able to use and reuse across different tests, and also flexibility, for example, to do things like turn off a small piece of this. For instance, I might run this with just create and delete and not update by simply unchecking this subtest. Now, each of these represents a test in itself. As you can see, the first test, it will navigate to our application. It will take browser capture along the way. It will add a new record here in the create process to the table. And this is a dynamic grid, by the way, too. So we'll show you how Test Studio can work in a dynamic grid situation. Next, we'll have an update, which actually runs a subtest within it. And this subtest will go through a loop to update multiple products in our grid. And then lastly, we'll see a delete operation, which actually takes advantage of one of the conditional logic methods that Peter pointed out, called the while loop, looking for a particular item in a grid page by page until it finds it, and then deleting it. So first we'll go ahead and execute this on its own. We'll do this from the master test, so you can see what it looks like to run. And by the way, all of this was captured with the record playback capabilities of Test Studio. So here you can see we have the 6 different browser options to choose from to execute. We'll pick on Firefox here first. And this will spin up the browser. Here in our first subtest, it will add the new record to the grid. Now we're into the update part where it's going to go to a few different lines in the grid to change the pricing. You can see I pick just different order here, and then back to the original to update the price for the one that was just added. Now we're paging through the grid looking for IPO coffee. Once it finds it on the appropriate page of the grid, it will delete that, and then it will head back to the first page and delete the record that we previously added. So very simple, very quick CRUD operation there, built against a dynamic grid. Now let me break it down for you a little bit further. Again, we have the create function here. As you saw, it ran very cleanly, and if we go back and look at the view log, we see the full log here with the browser and version that we're running against, all the steps that passed, the steps that failed if there were any there, the steps within the test here, test as step as we call it. And as you can see, it breaks that down for us with the timing of each particular portion of that. Here you can see the 3 different iterations of updates that it went through for the different products in the grid. And then finally, of course, the delete while loop portion of that. And the test was completed in under 40 seconds there. So I'm going to show you here how our new image backup search works with Test Studio. First of all, in this create operation, we can see there's a step to add the new record. When this step clicks the button, it makes it available for us to then add the record in there. So it's a key component of this test. Now, if we look at the element logic for this element, we can just right click on the element from the element repository and see how it's being identified currently. Now, each of our elements have a find logic that's automatically captured during the recording process. And as Peter mentioned, you can customize the way in which Test Studio will locate those elements and save them in the repository. In this combination, I'm using a tag name with the text content. So I didn't have to do anything amazing to make that happen. Test Studio is doing that for me as I record the test. As I click a button, just like a normal user would, it's capturing that and adding it to the element repository. But what happens if an element logic changes? So to simulate this, I'm just going to trim the text content here. It is looking for is exactly, although there are other operators that can be used. But for this demonstration, I'll keep it as is exactly with the intention of making it miss finding that particular element. So in your environments, if things change, if elements change like IDs and things like that, this is essentially the same type of function. So with that now broken, we'll go ahead and save this. You'll see that it is being used in multiple tests across my project. This is a beautiful thing of Test Studio. It will create those elements and reuse those elements. If it recognizes it being used in a different test, again, it won't create a duplicate of the element. It will simply create another reference to it. So I'm just going to modify it for this one test. And then we'll head back to the create test here. Let me make sure I saved that change. And now we'll have a broken test essentially. Running it again here in Firefox. And this will show you how when an element logic changes, Test Studio has the ability to kick in the image search. And this can be used as a primary search or a secondary search. So right now it's looking for the add new record button. As you can see, there is a timeout that's counting down, looking for it. It's scanning the DOM every half second, looking for that combination of the text content and the tag name to locate that element. Now, when that fails, it will kick in the backup search using the image-based search function. And the image-based search function captures images for each of the elements. And when those elements change in this nature, this will keep the tests running and working even if the logic is no longer successful. So it gives us a very clean backup, and now it kicks into the backup search. The image search found it very quickly, and as you can see, it's able to complete the create process. If we look at the log in this example, we can see that there was a warning issued, and you'll find this in your test list results as well. It will pass your test, but it will issue a warning with that test letting you know that the find expression didn't work. However, it was able to find it using the image search, and it was able to continue the test with that image-based element. So let's take another look. If we click on the image below, you can see that there is an image for the element. Also, when we float over the elements in the element repository, we see there's an image for it as well. So I can easily just click on that image to get into the image settings for that. You'll notice that we're in the place where we were just looking at the find logic as well, and we can click the image settings to get back to that. But focusing on the image-based side, you can see that it's captured this image for me. It has a threshold, basically matching the pixels of the element until it can locate that, so we can give it an appropriate threshold as well. And this keeps your tests moving forward, it prevents them from breaking for test-related issues when these elements change. Now, let me show you something a little bit more sophisticated as well. Actually, that's pretty sophisticated, I would say, but even more so when we jump into actually updating the elements. Yep, it'll be in the update here. And inside of my subtest, another type of element logic, a very sophisticated kind of element logic that we utilize, we can see inside of this click edit link. And if we go ahead and edit this element, you can see that it's using a chained find expression. This gives us a parent level identifier to locate the grid, a row level identifier to find the appropriate row, and then the edit button of that row. So we have grid, row, and cell to identify that. The challenge typically is each row has the edit button. How do we find the appropriate row and the appropriate edit button? So this is the type of element find logic that can be used, very useful and dynamic. And in this case, I've actually data-driven this find logic. I have a data source that basically tells Test Studio which row we're looking at, and that's why it was looping for me to update 3 different items in the grid, was because I'm feeding it an item name so that it can locate the appropriate row for that item and then the appropriate edit button for that row. So very powerful find logic under the hood, and in addition to that, the image-based search, which you can again use as a backup or as a primary method of locating those elements. So this gives you a lot of different tools to be very strategic and locate elements in difficult and dynamic environments, as well as make sure your tests continue to work when those elements may change. Okay, so going back in, let me show you one more thing. We're gonna actually create a failure in this test so we can take a look at the failure details here. So this time I'm just gonna simply turn off the add record step, and we'll go ahead and rerun this test now to create an actual failure. So we've made it so that your tests are even more robust so that they fail even less. But here we'll see an actual failure so you can take a look at what a failure looks like when Test Studio encounters one, and what information is captured for you and can be easily shared to the development team as well. So here again, it's looking to enter the product name. It's using that timeout. We use timeouts so the Test Studio can run as quickly as the application allows, but that way it can run very quickly. It doesn't have to always use up that time. It can definitely run quicker than that if it locates things, but once it runs out of that timeout, you can see that it does come back with a failure. When you encounter a failure in Test Studio, make sure you go and double click the red X next to your failed step to view the full failure details. Here you can see it was trying to enter the clam chowder into the product name text field, and it was unable to locate the element with the find expression given, in this case the combination of input tag name and the name of the element of product name. Couldn't find it that way. We didn't have an image search kick in, or the image search didn't find it as well. So this is true failure, and we can see that summary there for us. We have again the test log that gives us the steps to reproduce the issue, where it failed, some of those failure details there, the time it took to run as well. We have some more images as well. These images show us the expected state where we were supposed to be able to type in clam chowder, and the failed state where we can see that it wasn't open, it wasn't in the edit mode, it missed that clicking of the add new record button. So we see that failed state to compare that to. So this is very, very helpful. All of this captured, by the way, by Test Studio. Nothing needs to be done by the tester. This expected state is captured during test creation, test recording, and the failed state, of course, at the time of failure. We've also captured the page DOM at the time of failure too, so you can easily see what was going on behind the scenes when that failure occurred. And Test Studio's failure details gives you the opportunity to fix broken elements or broken steps if it's test related on that resolve failure. So this assumes that it was the element's fault since it couldn't find that product name field. As we know, it was actually the step before that. But this shows you how you can quickly and easily, even with suggestions, fix a broken element and repair it for your entire project. Back on the failure tab, a way to easily communicate by copy paste to a document or an email of some kind, and export to a zip file. This would be useful to send into even our support team. Maybe if you need our help, you can export this to a zip file and attach it to your support ticket. Or if we're pushing this back into a bug tracking system, in my case, Azure DevOps, you can easily click Submit Bug, click Submit, it attaches the failure details, communicates back to the team, and creates a feedback loop so that my development team now knows that I've located a bug in the application. You can see it even responds letting me know what bug was created in Azure, and I've just communicated that back to the team. They now have all of this data of what I intended the test to do, what actually happened at the point of failure, and what was going on behind the scenes when that failure occurred. That has all been sent over to my team with that failure details. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and repair my test. We'll check that checkbox, and again, I still have the image backup search running, but we'll go ahead and run it one more time from the beginning here, so you can see that run. Test Studio also makes it very easy to jump into the middle of a test, to edit a test or to troubleshoot that test. They're highly editable, and very little code, if any, is needed. You certainly can code as much as you want, either through our standalone interface that I'm showing you here, or even through our Visual Studio plugin as well. So this time, as you can see, I still have the image-based search kicking in, so it's going to count down my timeout. I made my timeout a little too long, but we'll wait for that to locate the button, and it should be able to continue my test successfully, even though it may have a bad find logic currently. Now here in a moment, I can take you into editing a test just to show you the ease of use of how easy these tests are to evolve. Many different frameworks and tools that we work with, you are required to essentially throw your test away and start over, or go under the covers and start scripting everything to fix it, and maybe even jumping from script to script to fix multiple tests. Whereas Test Studio really centralizes that, really reduces the maintenance, makes it easy for you to do that through the GUI of Test Studio instead of through code. However, of course, you do have every ability to code as well. So currently it's wrapping up in our delete part of the operation, looking for our IPO coffee. Looks like it has found it on page 3 there and deleted it, and back to page 1 where it deleted the clam chowder. So another successful run, this time with the image backup. Now, as I mentioned, if we wanted to jump back into the middle of a test to make a change to it, we can simply right-click a test step, click the Run to Here option, choose our browser that we want to work with, and start the recording process. So this will actually run to a certain test step and then attach the recorder. So it basically puts us right in the middle of the test in a point where we can either add new steps, re-record something, maybe troubleshoot an element, or from there to do any kind of maintenance we might need to do. So bear with me as I wait for my 30-second wait that I made way too long. And once it clicks that button, it should attach the recorder and we'll be in the live record mode. Now the record mode you can easily jump into just by hitting record and providing a URL. The run to here function is really, really useful when you're going into edit a test. Again, you don't have to just start over from scratch or throw your tests away. It's very easy, as you can see here. Now we're in the live record mode, but it's very easy to jump in and start interacting with that test. So as I start typing in here, oops, and I need to be able to spell that, you can see that it's capturing that for me And if we look back in Test Studio, it's captured that new step for me as enter text test. Even when I flubbed on the spelling there and corrected it, it didn't add duplicate steps or extra steps. It simply added that one test step for me. So now I have a new test step I can work with. And we can even see over here on the product name under used by that it's using that same element that we've already had. So Test Studio is smart enough to recognize elements it already has in the element repository, create new references to them, and then continue on from there. So I could even take this further and use the run from here or run selected steps and continue working through my test to see if my repair has fixed everything that I need. And as you can see, it was able to update that, add that new record, and pass the test essentially. So that's it for my part of the demonstration. I will pass it back over to Peter to wrap things up. I want to thank everybody for attending today, and thanks for taking a look at Test Studio.
Thank you very much, Andy, for this amazing presentation. I'm sure it was very useful for our attendees. Before we wrap up, I already see that you guys are having some questions for us. My colleague Ilian is going to take care for all of them and answer them. So stay tuned. In the meantime, whoever is interested, you can contact us at the email below that you see or the toll-free phone number that you can see, and of course we'll be happy to address all of your questions, concerns, and comments. So before we wrap it up, I'm going to give it a few more minutes so that all of your questions can be answered, and then we'll say goodbye. All right, thank you very much. One more time, I see that everything was answered. Thank you very much for attending this Test Studio webinar presented by Progress. And stay tuned for the upcoming features and roadmap of Test Studio. Have a nice remaining of your day and happy testing. Bye.